It's 7 o'clock, and all is well in the universe.
Or so you think it is.
Alrighty then. So we got lazy-ass nurses sitting around playing cards all day, and Senator Maureen Walsh isn't pleased. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who had plenty to say about the Christchurch attack, has nothing to say about the Sri Lanka bombings, and proof that the race war has been over for a long time tonight on the Unframe of Mind show.
Oh, business.
No.
You're listening to the Unframe of Mind show, the place to have the most mind-stretching, unprotected, intellectual intercourse of your life. Your host, Daniel Wagner, battles the forces of evil by lobbing fiery balls of truth, reason, and evidence over safe room walls.
Do you have a queen?
I do. Shit.
Thanks.
All right.
Do you have a jack?
Fuck. Yes.
Do you have a 10?
Hey, I do.
Whoa! Game over, bro. I got aces.
Fuck.
That's how you win a game of Go Fish. See, it's not just nurses who can play cards.
No, it's not.
We'll get to that here in a little while, but at any rate, before we get too heavily deep into our show here, I wanted to kind of ask you about how's your week been?
It's been pretty good, man. Enjoyed a little time off for Easter, and now it's back to work, and yeah, going heavy at it, 12-hour work shifts, doing that sort of thing. But no, did you guys have a good Easter? I know you guys probably don't really celebrate Easter.
I
but
mean, we celebrated as far as having a nice meal as a family. We had some homemade, some chicken, grilled chicken with homemade barbecue sauce,
nice. And
homemade rub for it. It was so good. I ate more chicken than I think should be legal. It's insane. At any rate, well, one of the big things I did work on over the weekend, because I had a 4-day weekend. That was nice. I got a lot of shit done.
Good.
And one of the big things I did was spent quite a few hours on editing the cow interview video that we've been probably wearing people out with publishing. And yet nobody's seen it. So I guess we're going to go ahead and play that one for you tonight.
Sure.
And we'll just kick off the show with a good laugh and see how that goes. Give me just a moment here, and we will bring that big old puppy up here.
Man, look at my ugly mug.
I know, right? So I've actually had a lot of comments on this. I had a guy say, I went to go watch your cow interview video last night, and I started playing it, and I thought for a second that I had the wrong video because it looked like a real news report. He thought it was a real news report. I'm like, that's exactly what I was trying to do.
Right.
So anyway, for all you folks out there who haven't seen it yet, check it out.
Even though AOC's Green New Deal was shot down 57-0, we still believe that cow farts are the #1 contributing factor to climate change. In this exclusive interview, Daniel goes live on location from Ground Zero to give you an utterly unbelievable story you don't want to miss.
With an estimated 110 kilograms of methane produced annually by just one dairy cow, these animals are responsible for an estimated 18% of the total greenhouse gases worldwide. And if that's not enough, future methane emissions are expected to increase due to global food demand increasing from population growth. As Anthony said, cow farts are literally destroying our planet right before our eyes. I know. I connected with Bruce and his son Paul, who own and operate a local cattle and livestock farm, to get this exclusive story straight from the horse's mouth.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has just put out the Green New Deal as a proposal for how to end climate change. She says that you guys are personally responsible because of your farts. What do you say about that? Notice the cow is very aggressive. Tell me, Muffin Man, do you feel guilty when you fart? Have you ever tried to blame anybody for your farts? Are you offended by the term holy cow? Is there currently a movement to end the Green New Deal? Do you have a beef with other cows? As the Me Too movement grows, do you feel sexual? As a brown cow, how do you feel about installing a wall at our southern border? Can I milk you long time? Okay, I think that was a nod. I think he says yes. So what do you think about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal, or as we like to call it, the eugenics program for bovine kind? Would you be comfortable if it was mandatory to install an anal air filtration system to help combat methane emissions? Cow seems very uncomfortable with this particular question.
I wasn't having any luck getting answers from the cow, so I asked the farmer's son, Paul, if he would agree to answer a few questions.
Does it concern you that you have in your possession animals responsible for Earth's destruction in the coming years?
No.
Do you feel guilty every time one of them passes gas?
No.
This is proving to be more difficult than I thought. Does it keep you awake at night knowing that just outside your bedroom door, there's an army of cattle blindly plaguing human society?
Not at all.
Exactly as I thought. These guys just don't care.
I love it. I love it. All right.
And of course, now we've got the
So there's that.
Google guy in the works, so be on the lookout for that.
Yeah,
one as
that's
well.
the next one. We've already got it. We've already got that one filmed, and the whole general gist is Google guy is an actual guy that comes to your house and records your data. You know,
Things
while
that you
you're
actually do in life.
right. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And the fact that we had you, who's like super tall, and then a little 15-year-old scrawny kid in a lab coat following you around with a clipboard, like classic. Y'all hang in there for that. That's going to be a good one. All right. So let's move into one of our main topics for the night. We wanted to talk about this issue that's been brought to my attention. You brought this to my attention.
It was brought to my attention. So, I mean, unless you're in the medical field, you probably wouldn't know what was going on with this to begin with. So,
yeah, I mean, it's still interesting to kind of see the disconnect between our elected officials and the healthcare industries, specifically nurses in this case. So basically, this is what I'm to understand of it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's this legislation being passed called what's it called, HB 1155 or something like that,
right.
in Washington State regarding. Let me just read this from the excerpt here. It addresses meals and rest periods for licensed practical nurses, registered nurses, surgical technologists, diagnostic radiologic, basically a whole bunch of different people. It prohibits an employer from, 1, using pre-scheduled on-call time to fill chronic or foreseeable staff shortages, and 2, from scheduling non-emergency procedures that would require overtime. Basically, it's got a lot to do with the breaks that they're required to have by law, and trying to make it so that it's more fair, I guess. I'm not really sure exactly the details on it, but that's not really what we're here to talk about today. This was the thing that was brought to my attention. Let me see if I get this. Okay, so we had a senator from Washington, Senator Maureen Walsh, and let me play this little video clip right here for you guys so you can kind of see what she said and why this is a big deal, and why, you know, we have this epidemic of card playing nurses plaguing our break rooms all across America. At any rate. There we go. We got it.
I have a critical access hospital in my district. This is not workable for it. Do you have a critical access hospital in your district? This does not apply to them. They may have 6 patients in that hospital. I'm in an underserved area, and all we're doing is making it more difficult to be served. I understand helping with employees and making sure that we have rest and things like that, but I also understand that we need to care for patients first and foremost. And by putting these types of mandates on a critical access hospital that literally serves a handful of individuals, I would submit to you, those nurses probably do get breaks. They probably play cards for a considerable amount of the day. But the reality is this bill does not apply to critical access hospitals. Please support this amendment and help out some of these underserved areas in the state that have these critical access hospitals that, frankly, we're being told may not be able to survive if they have to comply with these types of mandates. Please support this amendment.
Funny how you can read it.
Oh, shut up. I don't want to hear all that. That was a really quiet video. At any rate, yeah. So basically, the key phrase from there was where she says, "I understand making sure that we have rest breaks and things like that, but I also understand that we need to care for patients first and foremost. I would submit to you that those critical access hospital nurses probably do get breaks. They probably play cards for a considerable amount of the day." just basically showcasing what it is exactly that these nurses seem to, or this elected official seems to think that nurses do all day, especially in the rural hospitals.
Yeah, I always find it interesting that elected officials think that they know what's best for, the people that elect them in an office, when in fact that they don't. They don't have a clue as far as their constituents that elected them into office what's really going on in the real world. I mean, it was pretty evident that, they think that she just assumes that nurses just sit around and play cards, and obviously that's not the case. And we'll kind of touch into that, and we'll kind of go over some things that I've been aware of over the last couple of years with the people that I know and the person that I've dated in the medical field. So it's just it's to educate the public on what really goes on, at emergency rooms, any kind of medical facility.
We'll definitely get into that. I'd like to focus on the 30,000-foot view for just a minute,
Right.
and the fact that we constantly hear these preachings from our U.S. government, from our politicians, that hey, we need to pass like universal health care, single payer system,
Right.
because we obviously know what's best for all of you guys, and we see time and time again. Hang on a second, that's really driving me nuts. Okay, that buzzing was driving me nuts.
Right.
At any rate, so you see them constantly coming down from on high and telling us how everything's so much better when we do it as the government, when we do things, and it's like we see from time and time and time again. Every time the government gets involved in things and they start passing these regulations, we end up with even more problems than we had to begin with.
Right.
And one of those cases, which let me get into. Let me see here. Where's my picture? We've already covered that. Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely get into that in a minute. So anyway, so for people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and this Green New Deal, which one of the things was the universal health care, and that I know the progressives are running for it constantly shoving it down our throat, how we need a single payer system and things like that. And it's like, now wait a minute. You already seem to have this skewed view of what it is that nurses do during the day. This was just one example, I'm sure, of many. You already have this skewed view of what they do. You have no idea. You don't know what goes on the day to day.
Right.
You might have a general idea, but you're up here passing laws and having different legislative voting on different legislation to pass laws and regulations on these nurses that you assume have plenty of time to just sit around and play cards.
Well, that would be no different than me coming to you and saying, I don't think you really do much at work, man. Knowing full well I have no idea what it is you do for work. But I'm assuming that you probably just sit around, play on your phone, listen to podcasts, and don't do shit.
Yeah. Especially if I work out in a rural area where there's just not as much going on, I guess.
Well,
but
I guess.
Arguably, in a rural area, you probably have a similar amount of work. Maybe you don't have as much a volume of people, but of customers, so to speak, coming in. But you definitely, you have less employees working there to handle the load.
Right.
So when it does get big, bigger load in the rural areas, you got more people from wider area of the population coming in to visit one hospital, because it's not like we have a hospital for every town.
Right.
So it's like, it's kind of a balancing act, and as soon as you sit there and try to make these assumptions about what these nurses are doing all day, it's like, hey, wait a minute, I work my ass off too. Who the hell are you? But you actually had a small description of what a nurse that actually does throughout the day.
Yeah, and just something to kind of generalize and just kind of let the public know that may not be aware. But from a nurse practitioner in a day of life, and a nurse or nurses practitioners include dealing with 4 to 6 patients at a time. They're asking for pain meds, beds to be adjusted, a pillow, blanket, drink, food. Let's see. And when the family is demanding food or drinks, okay, it required. Well, I'm trying to see it. Sorry. Demanding food, drinks, and answers their questions as well. It requires us to go hours without restroom breaks, and most of the times our meals are done by bites between patients. Demands or also having other staff needing things done for patients, such as lab work, physician or MP orders, radiology, etc. We may look like we sit at the desk and play cards, but sitting there to get a crazy amount of charting done is required. So basically, anytime you walk into a hospital and you see nurses behind the desk, probably 10 out of 10 times they're doing charting. They're doing things that you don't necessarily see behind the scenes because that is required for them to do.
It's like every little thing that's done requires some kind of paperwork trail. And that's also because of, government regulation says, oh, well, you need to have documentation on this medicine and this thing and this procedure you did and this, and a lot of it's probably driven by insurance companies too that need all the information to make sure. I get it, but it's like, hold on now. There is other things besides dealing with the actual patients that you have to do beside, paperwork. There's a lot of paperwork.
Well, there's a lot of paperwork, but there's also a lot of running around that tends to take place that we don't necessarily see because we're not in that profession. Yeah. We're sitting in our little room in our hospital bed waiting to be seen, but not realizing that they're still having to wait for, radiology, x-rays, and all this other stuff and labs and, for other individuals that are also in the ER. The problem is that I don't think a lot of people realize is that majority of the people that are going to the emergency room don't have an emergency, so it's one of those situations where it's like, you get people that come in and it's like, you got a rash for a week, but no meds are being taken, a runny nose that started that day, a pimple on the face that just started, a paper cut from filing papers. Let's see, a child that vomit one time, a child that fell and bumped their head, and then all of a sudden it's like you have an overflow in the emergency room of non-emergencies. Yeah. And people need to understand that this is where your urgent cares, walk-in clinics come into play. And how this ties in with nurses, sitting around apparently playing cards when in fact that they're not. They're just so overwhelmed with what I think is non-emergencies. I can't speak for medical professionals, but what I think is non-emergencies that could have been dealt with elsewhere, such as IE clinics and urgent cares, and so forth. So when you have all these people sitting in the lobby waiting to be seen, and then you have an ER that all the beds are full, you're running constantly. You don't have time to sit down. And like what was, mentioned by a nurse practitioner is you don't get bathroom breaks. You don't get time to eat. And to suggest that there's given opportunities for people to have those breaks, that doesn't happen in the medical field. You know what I'm saying? Right. Because you want to make sure that you're trying to tend to these people. And the backlash to it is that if you don't see these people in a considerable amount of time, all of a sudden people start getting frustrated, they get aggravated, and they start screaming at you, they start hollering at you. And then in some, I guess, rare cases, people can actually get pretty volatile with you. Right. And that all falls back to the nurse that had to deal with the situation down, I believe it's Louisiana, and she ended up receiving multiple I guess contusions to her body, and that weeks later, or I think it was like a week later, that ended a result of her life due to blood clots in her knee. And there's more that goes on behind the scenes in the medical profession, and for a senator to downright play this out as nurses sit around considerably amount of the time and just play cards, it's a little frustrating for me, because I have taken the time to really understand from the medical side of things. Even though I am not a medical profession, right, I use common sense to know that these people are doing the best that they can to provide care for people, and often at times it's not for people who really need to be seen in the emergency room. Yeah, and that's what makes it so frustrating for the people that I know in the medical profession that are trying to care for people, but a lot of them shouldn't even be there to begin with. It's like frustrating, and it's also insulting, very condescending to suggest that that's all they do. Right. So from Ryan asks, is a rash on your privates an emergency? Asking for a friend. Well, I don't know. Yeah, I suppose it depends on the type of rash. So what you're going to need to do is go ahead and send us some pics at unframeofmind@gmail.com, and we will forward those pics onto a medical professional to then get back to you. Yeah. In which case, if it is an emergency, it's probably already too late. Well, and this kind of follows into the next side of this rant that I'm kind of going through. Last year, talking about the whole situation with my burns. Yeah. And, last July, I received 2nd and 3rd degree burns to my face. Right. And upon that happening, I was admitted to Vanderbilt. And, it's one of those situations where I want people to understand the process of how this went down. When I showed up to Vanderbilt, it wasn't 1 or 2 people waiting there for me. It was in the upwards of about 15 to 20 people of all different backgrounds, meaning that there was specialists, throat and eye and skin and burn doctors, nurse practitioner, nurses in training, all these people. When I finally got into my room, were standing there and trying to help somebody that actually had an emergency. Now, what I want people, and I'm going to try to paint this picture as best as I can, what people don't understand is when they get a call like this or they get a code, okay? Coding means, that patient is, their heart stopped, right, et cetera. So when they get this call that I'm coming in, you might have had a doctor, you might have had a nurse practitioner, or whoever might have been there. They could have been ready to head home. But because they got the call that I got burned, I don't know if they're having to stay longer than their 12-hour shift to take care of me, right. And I can't thank the doctors and everybody that really took care of me during this time that I went through this accident. But what I want people to know is that, if you had a nurse sitting at a desk, she had to stop what she was doing to help me. She may not have been able to finish her food. She may not, been able to use the bathroom because of my situation. And that's what I want people to know is that, I want people to treat and respect medical professionals a lot better than what they're currently going through. And that goes all the way up to the, to the government as well. I never once thought when I rolled into the ER on a bed and I had like 15, 20 people standing there that anybody was playing cards. Not once did that suggest anybody was just sitting at a desk just playing cards. Oh, he's been burned. We'll get to him later. No, that wasn't the case.
Do you think one of them at least were like, fuck, I was about to win our game of Go Fish? And
they probably got upset that they were about done with Go Fish, but I don't know. All I know is that the care that I was received, it's a telling story that is a lot different than what has been suggested by this elected official to suggest they play cards.
Also, another big factor in this that people aren't taking into account is that because of the way that the laws are set up and the way that these like free healthcare programs and like like say we got 10 Care is one of the state ran programs here. People will go to the emergency room for some shit that they had no business going to the emergency room for. And under normal circumstances, they would not go to the emergency room for, because under a normal circumstances, you would have to take into account, okay, well, if I do go to the emergency room, it's going to cost me X amount of dollars up front for a dedeductible or what have you. And you start to weigh that. Is it worth it? Is it something that's bad enough that I am okay with paying that upfront cost?
What it is, and what I have found, that it's harder to get in to see your primary care doctor these days. So a lot of people are going to the ER, which they would normally go and see their regular primary care physician for. And they're not doing that. They just decided to go to the ER. The problem is that it's clogging the system, and you're mixing non-emergency patients with actual emergency patients. So that's what I want people to understand is that you're getting an influx of both non-emergency and emergency, and then they have to weed them out. They have to see everybody. Now, the problem is that certain contracts through hospitals, at least here in Tennessee, they want patients to be seen by a certain amount of time. You become then a number. You then become somebody that is just seen and yet not really evaluated. I might be speaking out of turn when I say that, and I could be wrong, but when you have those people that are constantly going in and you're seeing real quick, you don't know if there's an actual problem. Then it turns into a situation of where, those nurse practitioners or nurses might have missed something. Because it's all about numbers. All I'm saying is that there is a broader picture here than I think what most realize that is actually going on in the medical profession when it comes to emergency rooms. So that's why I'm just telling people that, when the senator want to make this comment about, sitting around playing cards, that is the furthest thing from the truth. Now, she has since then apologized, but then I often kind of wonder if the apology is even sincere, because it created such a backlash for what she had done.
Under the extreme pressure of it all.
And as a politician, I'm going to tell you not me necessarily as a politician, but her as a politician, I don't believe her apology is sincere. I don't believe it. I just don't. I think that this is just to cover her ass for the comments and remarks that she made, and is trying to get her out of this debacle that she's currently kind of, found herself in. So it's just, I want people to better understand the emergency room.
So she says, She said, I was tired, and in the heat of argument on the Senate floor, I said some things about nurses that were taken out of context, but still they crossed the line. Like, how do you take that out of context? Like that, it's a clear.
You specifically said that nurses play cards majority of the time.
Like, I don't know how you take that out of context.
As somebody that's not even in the medical profession, that kind of bothers me because it's like somebody coming to me or suggesting, I just sit on my phone and play on my phone all night at work and I'm not doing anything, and I'm thinking, well, no, bitch, I'm actually doing some work here.
She says, I really don't believe nurses at our critical access hospital spend their days playing cards, but I did say it and I wish I could reel it back. It's a pretty standard that you just kind of believe people when they say what they say. I think she does believe it.
Well, like I said, I think she's trying to retract her comments.
Yeah, do you think she would just, like, if you didn't already have this preconceived notion about the goings on of a what they call it, a critical access hospital, why would you even say that to begin with? It doesn't even make any sense.
I just wanted to better educate people, or to try to give some shed of light to this whole situation when it comes to people in the medical profession that really don't get the breaks, that really don't get the bathroom breaks and to be able to eat because they're really trying to tend to people. And when they're sitting at the desk, they're not playing cards, they're charting.
Well,
they're waiting on x-rays.
To her point, what it does say, sorry to interrupt, it says, she says, I am worried this added cost will force some of them to close. She said it isn't proper for the legislature to micromanage the way hospitals manage their staffing. And I do agree with that. I agree that I think what she's trying to say is that we really didn't need... okay. What she's trying to say is if you have these requirements, then they're going to have to hire more staff, or they're going to have to bring on more staff and pay more people. These hospitals are already operating in the red. They're already suffering and struggling as it is.
Right.
And I don't know how that helped bolster her point to suggest that these nurses that are there are sitting around playing cards. I think she was trying to say, well, we really don't need to bring on the extra people because these nurses that are currently there have plenty of extra time. I mean, there's other ways you could have said it and not sounded like a complete dipshit.
Or how about maybe just
and try to make your point.
Or even before you even take to the floor to speak before your constituents, to maybe actually go and visit a hospital and see the ins and outs and the day-to-day operations of an actual hospital, urgent care, walk-in clinic.
You know what's sad, though, is, she makes a good point here that, these rural hospitals probably are already struggling with staffing issues as it is.
Right.
And it really doesn't help bolster her point. It doesn't help her at all if everybody's focused on that comment. And I almost wonder if the reason that was so highlighted, magnified in the media mainly was as a way to kind of redirect everybody's attention on, oh, she said nurses are playing cards. I mean, yeah, that's kind of a fucked up thing to say. But at the same time, you're making a good point that maybe these hospitals are already suffering. The extra costs will cause them to go under even faster, and we don't want that happening. I understand that.
Yeah,
that makes sense. But I didn't know any of that until I just read the apology, read farther on down an article, and found that out.
Mm-hmm.
Like, all I knew was what you said, what was said here. Like, I didn't know all that.
Right.
It's like, I mean, it really sucks that she probably did have a good point, but she just did it completely wrong.
Yeah, that was one of the situations where, again, you need to know, what's going on before you speak. Don't speak out of turn.
So we got from the comments, Kristen says, playing cards? No, they play on their phones like everyone else. Oh, and then she says it's administration that has them operating in the... What's wrong with my voice today? She says it's administration that has them operating in the red, just like schools. There's way too much documentation. This takes way too much time. I completely agree with that. There's that all the bureaucratic red tape and bullshit that keeps coming up all the time is really a huge part of the cost involved. Because, I mean, I would like to see the percentage of time per patient spent on the patient versus the percentage of time per patient spent on paperwork for the patient.
It might be a drastic difference than I think most people realize.
Yeah,
I really do.
Alrighty, so I think we've beat that dead horse more than one way. Let's move on, shan't we?
Yeah.
All right, so I've got a few other things that I want to touch on before this evening's over. We've got about 30 more minutes. That should be plenty of time.
Yeah.
So the Easter bombing in Sri Lanka, did you hear about that?
No, I did not.
All right, so let me click out of all these extra things I've got going on here. I've got a lot going on, guys. You have to excuse me. I've got tabs upon tabs upon tabs. And now I've not. Now I've just got a few. Anyway. So in Sri Lanka, we had a rash of bombings going on down there. Let's see. Oh my gosh. I had all that. Okay, so here it is. That's what I was looking for. All right, so we got hundreds of people have been killed and hundreds more wounded in a series of blasts that rocked Sri Lanka on Easter Sunday, the deadliest violence to hit the South Asian country since the civil war ended a decade ago. The explosion struck in Colombo, the capital, Negombo, a town north of the capital, and in Batticaloa, a town in the east coast. Churches, hotels, and housing development were targeted. Nobody has claimed responsibility for the bombing so far. I think they have since this article came out.
They have, yeah.
Because that came out the 22nd. We're now on the 24th.
All right.
Anyway, casualties. 290 people have been killed, more than 500 wounded. From what I understand, these were specifically done on Easter.
To target Christians.
Targeting Christians, targeting churches. As many as 35 foreigners may have died. Confirmed that several American citizens were killed in the, quote, terror attacks. I don't know why they put it in quotations. I guess. Anyway.
We are pulling this from Time, so.
Who perpetrated the attacks? There's been no immediate claim of responsibility. Okay, and told that 13 suspects were in custody. Well, they must know a little something. Coordinated bombing attacks were carried out by suicide bombers from the domestic militant group called National Tawfiq Jamaat. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that correct.
It's a Muslim radical terrorist group.
But just a second ago it said no immediate claims of responsibility. Okay, you got it. Literally in the paragraph right there, it says no claims of responsibility, and then it says the bombs were carried out by, maybe they were carried out, but they just didn't claim it was them. Makes a lot of sense. Anyway.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's going on. And yeah, that's a terrible tragedy. Lots of deaths.
We just spoke about this towards the end of our last live show last week.
Right. Yeah. This is something that's, we were talking about that, about the Notre Dame Cathedral as well.
Right.
About that could have been a potential, it just seems like there's a huge rash of attacks going on the what's
the
known
persecution
as the
on Christians
holiest,
has been unbelievable.
Yeah, the holiest week in the entire year. Anyway, so Sri Lanka blasts, brain fart. Okay, government enforces curfew across the nation. A string of blasts ripped through hotels and churches. Prime Minister condemned the attacks as cowardly and said the government is working to contain the situation. Much of the church roof was blown out in the explosion. So yeah, they've decided to call for a curfew. On top of it.
Have you seen what Obama and Clinton have, the tweets that they have posted, calling these Easter worshipers?
Easter worshipers?
Yeah. You have not seen that?
I have not seen those. Easter worshipers.
Yeah. You need to pull it up. You need to see the contrast difference between how they addressed the New Zealand attacks versus the attacks in Sri Lanka. I mean, it's like, I'm surprised that you have not even seen this. Where's my phone?
Oh, go ahead. Keep on going. I'll find it.
But yeah, no, it's just one of those situations to where it's unbelievably.
Okay, so Hillary Clinton. Yeah, here we go. Let's open that in a new window. Open image, new tab. There we go. All right. My heart breaks for New Zealand and the global Muslim community. We must continue to fight the perpetuation and normalization of Islamophobia and racism in all its forms. White supremacist terrorists must be condemned by leaders everywhere. Their murderous hatred must be stopped. Okay, and then on the next one she says, on this holy weekend for many faiths, we must stand united against hatred and violence. I'm praying for everyone affected by today's horrific attacks on Easter worshippers and travelers in Sri Lanka. Easter. Oh, I don't understand. Why is that a problem?
Why can you point out Muslim community, Islamophobia, and why can't you just say, I don't know, Christians on Easter weekend?
Okay, I guess I could see that.
That's what the big uproar is about right now.
Michelle and I send our condolences to the people of New Zealand. We grieve. And he says the Muslim community. I get what you're saying. Instead of Christian community, it's Easter worship. I understand. I get you. I got you. It's interesting because I have never seen that phrase, Easter worshippers.
But
that's a brand new one on me.
What kind of bothers me is that they're so pro-Muslim, and if anything that you say is taken completely out of context or misconstrued, all of a sudden it's white supremacist and it's Islamophobia.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
No, I get it. I get it.
To me, it's just, and it's almost like they have the same person writing their tweets. If you look at the correlation between them, you know, they want to condone white supremacist terrorist groups, but they can't call out radical Islamic terrorists.
Leftist politicians have one staff writer that writes for all of them.
But you see what I'm saying? It's like, why are you
like, we have a Dropbox full of tweets you guys can use. Just copy and paste, and whenever you're ready.
But the problem I have here is the white supremacist terrorist. I mean, if you want to talk about white supremacy, it's probably at a micro level compared to the Muslims that have killed Christians, even over the last decade. You know, but you can't call that for what it is. Yeah. That really pisses me off.
Well, our friend of the show, Dia, says, when the terrorist attack occurred on Christchurch, I spoke out against it because it was evil and senseless. With Christians, who are the world's most targeted religion, the world, specifically the left, sits in silence. This is something I wish I was wrong about, but I'm not.
And she's absolutely right. Yeah. I mean,
yeah, that's just kind of the thing I was wanting to. The reason I was wanting to bring it up is because I read somewhere how Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I know her name keeps coming up over and over again.
God,
she sat there and tweeted like 14 different times, from what I understand, about the Christchurch killings. The Christchurch killings was about, what was it about? Let's see. Yeah, after posting 14 times on the Christchurch killer responsible for 50 deaths, AOC says 0 about the Sri Lankan Christian bombings, where it's reported at least 290 died. And I think the big part of this is because it doesn't fit the narrative that they're trying to. And in order, you have to avoid even acknowledging its existence. Like if anything that goes against the narrative, you got to completely ignore, pretend it doesn't even exist.
Well, I'm going to say something that's probably going to piss off a lot of people. I think Christians need to start standing up for themselves, and I think that they need to retaliate. Sorry, I do. This shit with Muslims, this shit with radical Muslims.
Well, when you say retaliate, what do you mean?
Well, I'm trying to keep us on the air, not off the air.
I'm just saying. I mean, because that goes down a dangerous path. I mean,
it does.
And the reason I'm saying
sorry,
is because this is a negative. This is a positive feedback loop that keeps feeding in on itself. And if nobody stops, it will get worse, and it will continue.
Well, then who's going to stop it? Because nobody is. Everybody is told, especially Christians, that we're just supposed to sit back and it's not all Muslims.
Well, it's really not. It's really not either. I'll give you that. I'll tell you that. It's not all Muslims either. It's not. I think a lot like.
But nobody's doing anything about this, and continuously Christians are being targeted.
Right.
At what point are Christians going to finally put themselves in a position to stand up for themselves?
Yeah, there's a big difference between counter-striking and self-defense.
How do you answer to something like that?
Well,
almost 300 people dead.
I will tell you the first thing you need to do is look at why is it that Muslims are entering these Western nations in such massive numbers, first of all. And it has a lot to do with your government. It's nothing to do with the Muslims. It's got to do with your government giving away a bunch of free goodies.
It doesn't have anything to do with Muslims? Dude, well, what about 9/11? I mean, there's so many situations that...
Okay, well, with 9/11, you're even talking about that was their version of a counter-strike where we're already in their countries bombing the shit out of them already.
I know, and that's what I'm saying.
We shouldn't have been over there. Again, it's our governments going over there and putting their hands in buckets that they don't belong in. That's a cookie jar.
Don't you have Iran that's constantly chanting "Death to America"?
No, they can chant it all they want, as long as they stay their ass over there. I could give a shit what they say.
But when the shit starts knocking on your back door, and then when you have other countries that are actually having to, I mean, okay, look, Sri Lanka, why there? Why?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. This isn't just a localized thing that in Western civilization. Yeah. It's just not in America. It's all over. It's Paris. It's, it's here. It's there. It's all over the place. It's not generalized just Western, civilization.
Well, also notice that a lot of this shit didn't start really happening and coming into the public consciousness until we started actually going over there and taking over and buying Saudi Arabian oil, Iranian oil, and basically funding these countries, putting a massive amount of money in these areas that normally wouldn't have been there.
Right.
And when you have a bunch of money coming in, you have, as a country, you can grow. You can start to grow. Your ideologies can really start to spread and flourish where they wouldn't have normally done otherwise, because when you don't have the government intervention in it, you're kind of stuck with a free market kind of scenario. And I'm sorry, bad ideas don't succeed in a free market scenario.
So what you're suggesting is that government is responsible for the war between religions?
The war between religions, I would say they have a huge role to play in it. Yeah.
Right.
And I think as long as it's like good fences make good neighbors, you know that?
Yeah.
As long as they stay on their side of the fence and they can believe whatever the hell they want. They can even scream over to our side of the fence and say, hell, death to Americans. I could give a shit.
So it doesn't concern you that we have Muslims in political offices in government?
Again, that's government intervention. That's government being.
But I'm asking you, are you concerned about that?
It's this giant tool called government that everybody wants. It's the ring of power, so to speak.
Right.
It's very, very delicious looking to people who want to come in and do bad stuff to us.
Right.
For people like basically any of these recent Muslim representatives we have now, I don't know what their hearts and minds are, but a lot of people are worried.
Hearts and minds? You got one of them that made a comment that
some
people did something and something bad. I mean, she couldn't even call that out for what it was.
Right. No, I get it. And you're dealing with different ideologies, and you're dealing with a whole bunch of different people grasping at that ring of power.
Right.
You take the ring of power away, you destroy the ring of power. There's no way for this to continue to perpetuate into our society. There's just, it's just not going to happen.
So what would you suggest needs to be done then?
Well, at this point, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think violence is ever the answer. I really don't. Self-defense is a different story.
Well,
I'm totally for self-defense. I'm not saying just sit there and take an ass whooping and just
but that's what Christians have been doing.
Well, that's.
I mean, we're told to constantly. If you talk to any Christian, if you talk to any pastor, they don't want to go down the avenues of violence.
Yeah.
We all know this. So we're constantly having to say, okay, well, we should, forgive our enemies. But at what point does it wake up such a nation or even, Christians, and we find ourselves in another crusade?
Let's look back at the 19th century here.
Okay.
Or the 20th century. Sorry.
20th
century. Let's look back at the 20th century for just a minute and notice this pattern that keeps emerging, that in general, Western nations, very, very patient. They will take a lot of shit. And
right.
And they're very, very long fuse, and it takes them a really long time to get angry. Mm-hmm. But if you keep on picking and keep on picking and keep on picking, people in the Western countries do have a tendency to get very mad. And when they do get mad, you really, really wish you hadn't to piss them off.
Well,
we're talking about
point, though.
Multiple world wars with millions and millions of deaths.
Well,
okay?
and that's kind of generally what I'm getting at.
It's what's eventually going to end up happening if things
right.
don't change. I don't want it to go down that road any more than anybody else.
I don't either, but it's suggesting that we're headed that way, and it's been suggesting for that for some time, preferably since 9/11.
Yeah,
and it just keeps on, it keeps on, it keeps on, and it's going to perpetuate itself so big that it's not going to matter what you and I say anymore. Yeah. Everybody's going to start taking matters into their own hands.
Once we start resorting to swords and forget about words, it's I don't know.
I'm telling
there's
you,
nothing
dude,
more.
We talked about
there's nothing
this.
more that our show can do at that point.
Well, but we talked about this.
It's actually important to have people like us out there talking about this stuff now, calling out the actual problems for what it is, because a lot of people really think it is Christians versus Muslims, and that's the end the problem.
Right.
But really, it's Christians versus Muslims, and they're both attempting to grasp the ring of power.
Right.
And that's where you end up getting, and that's what it's always been historically. That's even back what we were just talking about for Easter, about the battle between the pagan religions and Christianity.
Right.
Everybody wanted the ring of power of government, because that means your religion got to be in power. That means you got to put your belief systems on everybody else. You get to enforce your belief system on everybody else. We have the exact same thing going on now.
Well, I think part of it is, and I think there's a contrast difference between the political side of things versus the human element of the everyday person, meaning that as Christians and just common Americans that are Christians, they're not seeing this from a political standpoint or political power. They just want it to stop. Then you have the political aspect of things where it's that that control that you're talking about. And I think that's the difference, is that you have government thinking, looking at this from control. Then you have everyday Americans, Christians all over the world, that are just tired of the attacks. And I think that's the difference, is that we don't see it as a power, as a power struggle here. We just want this shit to stop.
It absolutely is. I mean, think about
but
it this
I think
way.
it is
You've
with our politicians, not so much with me and the everyday person. We don't see it as a power struggle.
well, the everyday people, we see what the media tells us, and we feel like
Right.
it's one of those black and white issues. Muslims and Christians, Muslims and Christians, Muslims and Christians. Which side are you on? That bullshit again.
Right.
And don't be mistaken. Don't forget for a second how much the U.S. government would love to be at war over in the Middle East. Like, there's a lot of resources over there's a lot of oil over there.
Well, yeah,
that
is
if they can
government.
Right. If they can sit there and keep perpetuating this propaganda about how bad Muslims are and how Christians and Muslims are at each other's throats and you're Islamophobic and if they can keep putting that shit back and forth and poisoning the well that way, you're damn right. People are going to be way more on board with going up there. Let's go kick their asses. They're doing, we're going to go to war.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Government's
though.
like, I
It's
bet
not,
that's what we've been wanting the whole time.
But it's not Muslims having that attack just on Americans. Now we're seeing it all over the world. It's not just isolated to America anymore. So that's why I have a hard time believing that it's such the ideology of just oil and our conflict over in the Middle East, because now we're starting to see it in other countries.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, there is ideologically driven radicals involved here, and those, it's almost like. I would say these terrorist attacks are a lot like our version of Antifa. It's like, except they're a lot more violent, a lot more willing to
scale.
Yeah, they're on a bigger scale.
Right.
It's a very small minority of the population. Most of the Muslim population aren't going to do shit. I mean, they may even have terrible beliefs. They may even agree with those guys. They're not going to do anything. They'll never have any impact on our life whatsoever. No matter, nowhere will it show up on our day to day.
Right.
But you have a few, radicals. Media blows it up.
I think it's more than just a few.
Well, you get what I'm saying. I mean, when you're talking about the Muslim population, we're talking about numbers in the billions. Okay,
Right.
We're talking about a lot of people.
I think it's like around the vicinity of about 2.8 billion Muslims.
Yeah. So when we're talking about a few of a billion, we could still be talking about very well easily 500,000 would still be, I would say, a few. So I mean. And that number, according to the media, if you sit there, 500,000 terrorists, holy shit.
Right.
Yeah, that sounds like a big number, but worldwide, it's actually not that big.
But I think a lot of them, with them, believing in the ideology that they do, but also the person that they do worship, which is Allah. I spent some time in the Muslim community, this has been several years ago, to really understand what was going on. Mm-hmm. Why were they being persecuted so much, even more so after 9/11? What were all Muslims made out to be as bad as what the mainstream media painted them to be? And as I got kind of integrated into the Muslim community, I started to realize that the person that they worship and the thoughts that they had about Western civilization.
I
need some water.
Okay.
It's not good. Just because they don't act out on
I get it.
Those threats or they're not out there bombing buildings, they're not out there blowing themselves up. They still believe that Christians, they still believe that Western civilization is not good.
Yeah, no, I get it.
And because they don't act on it.
And that's one of the downsides of trying to encourage, I guess, immigration from lower IQ societies too.
Right.
Is lower IQ people tend to have really bad ideas, and it's really easy to propagandize them into thinking a certain way. If I remember doing a show and looking back at some old photographs of Iran, I think it was Iran or Iraq, one of those two countries, from like the 1970s.
Right.
And these women were like high fashion, wearing skirts, had the Americanized hair. It was like, wait a minute, and you look at these.
Sure, that wasn't Afghanistan. They're more Americanized.
It was either Iraq or it was not anywhere near what it is now. I mean, all this stuff that we're seeing right now is pretty recent. Like as far as the extreme Muslim radicalism that you're seeing, this is still something that's relatively new, and it's like I can kind of understand it too. At the same time, I'm not saying I condone it or anything or I agree with it.
You understand what's taking
but
place.
I understand from their perspective,
Right.
if it was turned around and I've got this superpower country coming in and bombing my people, killing my family, you damn right that's going to radicalize me. I'm going to be pissed off, and we're going to be like rounding up all our buddies, and we're going to be going to all the underground channels and trying to, I think what was it? I'm going to butcher it, but I think it's something like a one man's terrorist is another man's revolutionary.
Right.
It's like, or one country's terrorist is another country's revolutionary.
So then how does that factor in all the other countries that have been dealing with, the onslaught of, ISIS or just radical Muslims?
Again, the more that it keeps, the more you keep putting that magnifying glass on it, the more you encourage it, the more you keep, the numbers will grow, the influence will shift, and it will grow, and it's going to become a bigger and bigger problem. And I just don't, I really, really hesitate to, because I know we could do some damage. I know we could do some damage. And if the shit keeps going the way it is, eventually some damage will be done. I've seen what that looks like, and I don't want to see that again. We don't want to see that again. We don't want to think of what you're saying is if say we send our military in to stop this stuff. My son is on the verge of being military age.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to vote for that. I'm sorry. I call me selfish, but I'm sorry. I'm not going to put my son in the middle of a conflict that ain't got shit to do with me. I didn't start it. I had never wanted it. I didn't vote for it. My parents didn't vote for it. My parents didn't ask for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why the hell would I put their grandkid in harm's way?
Right.
Or why would I support some kind of a, you know what I'm saying? Now, I understand that, they might still keep trying to come, but, at some point you got to hold the government accountable and say, listen, we can't keep fucking bringing these people in. Like, look what's happening. Like, hold that, stop the flood stop the leak where it's actually happening. Not, I don't think retaliating against an entire culture of people is going to be the solution.
When I say retaliate, that's a broad statement. Let me generalize, kind of narrow it down to what I mean by, retaliating.
Mm-hmm.
I think what needs to happen is that Christians, they need to be more aware of their surroundings. They need to be more alert of what's going on and protect themselves, in the event of anything ever does happen again. And I don't condone violence of any matter, but I will say that, if it's my life or theirs, I'm taking yours. I'm not taking mine.
Right. No, I agree with you. Yeah, self-defense, I'm all for it. Absolutely.
Right. So, but also, this all kind of falls back to my time spent kind of learning the Muslim community. There are good people in this world. I've discussed this time and time again on the show. Majority of the Muslim population live by Allah. Yeah. Allah is not it's not a God of peace. It's not somebody that.
No, I agree.
Teaches,
I mean, in that case, or in that. With that being said, I could also say that the Christian God also is not a God of peace. If you actually read the Bible, it's not exactly a God of peace either. It actually says in quite a few little quotes and parts of the Bible that. It's not just all peace, love, and harmony. It's absolutely not that.
Well, I mean, if we're going to go down that avenue, it does teach you to, restraint. It teaches you to, rather love your neighbor than. Oh, I get you. I'm not. Know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I don't want to make this all about doctrine or anything like that. But I'm just saying, if you were to say, if you just look at their book and what they believe, then you could also look at the Christian book and what they believe, and kind of come up with some similar arguments for the most.
Right.
I'm not saying
that's for another show.
I'm not trying to compare them or nothing like that, and say one's better than the other or anything like that. Right. I'm just saying, if you're going to start going down that road, it's easy to do a tit for tat.
Oh yeah.
About which ones believe which. I don't know. I just
call me Islamophobic.
I would like to see.
I will
first,
take that title.
Yeah, I would like to first see, our representatives actually acknowledge these things happen. Like we said, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, zero to say about it.
I wonder why they can't call it radical Islamic terrorist. Why? What is preventing them from actually saying that's what it is? Why can't they do that?
Because it doesn't fit the narrative. It doesn't fit the
But
narrative.
don't you see where this is constantly going to
Oh,
create
absolutely. I know. That's exactly their goal.
problem?
That's their goal. That's what they want.
Well, I mean, it's just going to continuously pissing off a lot more
Yep,
people.
you're right.
And
You're right.
like I said, this is going to tread us down a very dangerous road if we're not careful.
All right. How much longer you want to go on this? Because I've got 2 more topics.
Let's go.
And phobismus as well. All right. So we had another. Where was this? Yeah. All right. So basically, we had. Oh. Yeah. So
You racist fuck.
yeah,
Why the hell are you playing this?
singer by the name of Kate Smith. She's been dead for like 30 years, and apparently there was this song that was found to be very racist. And now, as a result, let's see. What are you trying to show me? What the hell? Anyway, her version of "God Bless America."
Right. Which is typically played during a 7th inning stretch at the Yankees game, and it's also been played at the Flyers games, the Philadelphia Flyers. And all of a sudden now everybody is in this uproar about a song that she had did. Actually, I think it was 2 songs that were considered racist.
Yeah.
But they were
she
actually
died,
satire.
She died in 1986, okay? The song itself, the God Bless America one, was written in 1918 and revised for her in 1938,
Right.
okay? So
I'm becoming more racist every time I listen to this. As it
I know, I
continues to
feel it.
plays.
So the Philadelphia Flyers had a memorial statue of Kate Smith erected at its stadium. Smith herself sang the song at Flyers games, and now the Smith version will no longer be played at the statue, and the statue has been removed.
Yep.
I think they meant the statue, but they put the statute has been removed. At any rate. Yeah. So basically, we have this famous singer from, the early 20th century, has a great song, real famous for it, but also was discovered she had some other songs that were less than desirable, but nobody understands satire anymore, I guess. So
Nope.
One song was called "That's Why the Darkies Were Born." One song was called, what was it? A song deemed racist was called "Pickaninny Heaven," sung by Smith in 1933 in a movie where black children were featured in an orphanage. And now, and it quotes her, says, "And now, folks, I'm going to sing this song for the little colored children listening in an orphanage in New York City."
Do people not realize that this was common back in that day to use words such as colored and and things of that nature?
We're talking about a sign of her time, basically.
Right.
And we don't even know, like you said, this is satire.
It was satire.
This could be,
was not even.
It's like we make joke, like she's like, here it says great big watermelons and pork chops right outside your door with a Swanee River made of real lemonade, and in the heaven that's made just for pickaninnies she sings to the little orphans, though the good Lord took your mammy, she'll be waiting for you there. Like what? Like we make jokes about that now.
Yeah.
and
How many?
like-
Okay, let me ask you this: how many jokes do black people discuss about white people, or how many jokes do white people say about black people?
Okay, so
A lot.
So the lyrics for that's why darkies were born. Says someone had to pick the cotton, someone had to pick the corn, someone had to slave and be able to sing. That's why darkies were born, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just multiple stanzas of that particular idea. This was, of course, an article. The article I'm reading from is from Heavy.com, which is a heavily left-leaning publication. Right. At any rate, I'm like, okay, so this is my view of this here. My general view of this is, if we're having to go back to a song,
Hang on, I'm going to stop you right there. I think what we need to do is we need to do the rendition of her song. You and I.
The rendition of her song.
Yeah.
Why? I'm not that interested in it.
But it's satire. It was back then. Why can it not be now?
You're probably right.
Why not? How about we bring it back to life?
Just because I have a lot of other projects already in the pipeline, and I'm already overworked. But here's my general view of this: is we're looking at they're having to go all the way back in time to like 80 years ago.
That's almost like going back 10 years on your Twitter account.
Yeah, 8 decades ago to find any example of racism. It's like that, to me, tells me that we have fixed this. Race war, I'm calling it. It's over.
It's over.
We're done. We're not having a race war anymore. Like, if we're having to go back 8 decades to find any example of racism, racism's done. We're finished, guys.
If you went back, I don't know, probably, yeah, because I've had my Twitter account now since 2009. I've had Facebook since 2014. And I'm sure if you went back and you dug, you could probably find something that I've posted and take it completely out of context and deem me as a racist, a homophobic.
Oh, yeah.
You could probably find multitude of things to classify me as X, Y, and Z. But here's the thing. I'm not a sensitive little bitch, man. I come from an area where, either you understand and get me as an individual and understand that I mean no malice or no harm towards what it is that I'm saying. They're just my thoughts and my opinions,
Right.
and leave it at that. But then you have all these snowflakes and you have all these social justice warriors that
Snowflakes.
want
That
to
term's so
prove
2016.
their point that no, you should not do X, Y, and Z, and if you do, that you're a homophobic and Islamophobic and whatever phobic else you can find.
Yeah.
It is just ridiculous that people have gotten so they've gotten their panties so much up in a fucking wad. It's like it's hilarious, man. And I love messing with people. That's why I post half the shit that I do. It's to get a rise out of people. I love it. You people make it so easy for me to just sit there and I'm just laughing. I'm like, you're a dumb motherfucker.
Like, you need to calm down. Like, you need to take your panties out of that bunch. Here,
That's why I don't even get upset about half the shit that I post on Facebook or even on Twitter. I'm going to read this. I'm going to find it. It won't take me long to do.
Yeah. I'm just absolutely loving that this is the kind of thing that's become mainstream. Like, oh God, we must be outraged by this.
So there was a guy that huge SJW on Twitter, and I was trolling his account, and I think that's when you were telling me why bother spend time messing with him.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved it because they probably deleted it for the shit that I said.
Oh no, you'd see it on there as an unavailable tweet. It would still show some placeholder there. It wouldn't be completely gone.
I'm not seeing.
Yeah,
it
I think
now.
you and I both talk on Twitter so much that it would take us.
No, this wasn't that far back, and because of everything that I've currently had going on, I haven't really been retweeting things as I should. I know it's in here, man. I want to find it because it's like absolutely racist what I said.
You sound very proud of this.
Well, and I am. And there was this one that I posted that says I was kind of going back to the whole identity politics, saying that I'm Italian, therefore I identify as a pizza. Everyone loves pizza.
Oh yeah.
I post shit like that.
Was that part of it? Was that part of that thread?
It was around that area.
Oh, if it was, wait.
No, it wasn't a part of that thread.
Oh, gotcha.
It was in this general area, and I'm not sure why it's not showing up, but
Yeah, it'll be under tweets and replies.
yeah, I have to find that, man, because it was hilarious. But go ahead and move on.
Alrighty, I will go ahead and move on. So that song was "God Bless America" by Miss Kate Smith.
I'm feeling more racist by the hour.
Yeah, I know. Like, the more she sang, the more I felt like I just...
Okay, here it is. I found it.
Oh.
I said, this dude is losing his mind in our page. This is from my Twitter account.
Okay.
I said, it's a real live SJW. Hey, Carl, want to watch Game of Thrones together? I'll buy some brown M&Ms and bring fried chicken, invite a few black friends over, just bring some watermelon. You have to understand, you have to sometimes fight these people with racial jokes. And that's what I did. Now, the black people I know would probably see that and laugh their ass off. People who don't know me
would
be like, oh, my God, he's a racist.
Absolutely.
We ought to burn him at the cross.
There's a guy I work with that every interaction we have is about us, me being a white guy and him being a black guy. It's all comedy. It's all just it's meant. He's,
I know.
He's just making a joke of it. Like, oh, is that because I'm black? that kind of thing.
Right. And I
like
love
everything I do.
I love
everything.
people who have that kind of character to them that know that it's a joke and you can actually go that far with them. I mean, it's just one of those situations, depending on where you come from, your upbringing, to me, it is just, Oh, you gotta love people in this day and age. They're fucking idiots. But for the ones that aren't, I love you.
All
I
right,
truly
so
do.
so the last thing I actually found, I've been reading this book by Jordan Peterson called 12 Rules for Life.
I need to get on that because I heard it's a really good book.
It is. It's a fantastic. I'm actually a few pages ahead of that. I better go on back. Page 198. For those of you that want to follow along, please flip to your page 198. I'm going to read a paragraph out of here because this paragraph in particular really stood out to me.
Right.
As like I had to read it a few times, so not because I didn't understand it, but because I really wanted to absorb the information.
Right.
Anyway, let's see. So basically, he's talking about how to tell if things are good or bad. This is under Rule 7. And Rule 7, let me just make sure I get this correct here. Get the right page, dummy.
All right, class.
Yeah.
While we're waiting on the teacher.
So the Rule 7 basically says pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient.
Right.
Okay, just to give you a little context. So he starts out, says, if there is something that is not good, then there's something that is good. If the worst sin is the torment of others merely for the sake of suffering produced, then the good is whatever is diametrically opposed to that. The good is whatever stops such things from happening. And in the next section, it says, it was from this day that I drew my fundamental moral conclusions. Aim up, pay attention, fix what you can fix. Don't be arrogant in your knowledge. Strive for humility, because totalitarian pride manifests itself in intolerance, oppression, torture, and death. Become aware of your own insufficiency, your cowardice, malevolence, resentment, and hatred. Consider the murderousness of your own spirit before you dare accuse others, and before you attempt to repair the fabric of the world. Maybe it's not the world that's at fault. Maybe it's you. Maybe you've failed to make the mark. You've missed the target. You've fallen short of the glory of God. You've sinned. And all of that is your contribution to the insufficiency and evil of the world. And, above all, don't lie. Don't lie about anything, ever. Lying leads to hell. It was the great and the small lies of the Nazi and the communist states that produced the death of millions of people. I was like, holy shit. Yeah, that's kind of how I felt about it, too.
No, and that's one of the reasons why I love his stuff so much is because he does challenge your thought process and kind of gives you a different interpretation of how to view life.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, most of us don't follow through with the things that we should.
Gosh.
And it's just, what if we actually took the time to do the right things? There's a lot of things in my life that I know that I should have done differently, that I should have approached differently, the relationships that I've been through, the marriages that have failed. And, even when it comes to my daughter, it's one of those situations where, it's a live and learn process. It truly is, What, is there a bug up there?
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay.
I was just making sure everything's still good.
No. So I love the fact that he's challenging our minds and our thought process moving forward in life to want to better ourselves. And as far as the lying goes, that is an individual-based situation. I don't think anybody in the realm of this entire earth is even capable of going their entire life without telling one lie.
Yeah.
I think it's impossible. But I do love the fact that he is trying to get people to kind of go more in that direction of being truthful to the other people that are in their lives. And there's been a lot of times where I've told lies, white lies, big lies, small lies, whatever you want to call them. And I think a lot of what we need to do now, and something I've only recently learned throughout my life, is taking accountability for a lot of the things that I've done.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas before in the past, I would sit here and tell you, well, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, now that I've kind of stepped back a little bit and aged in the process, I've learned that I have got to start owning up to my mistakes and my faults. Things that I necessarily wouldn't do 5-10 years ago. And now when I'm learning to do this, I've become a more critical thinker. I've become more of a person that is, one of those situations to where I'm more susceptible of being more self-conscious, I guess I could say, about things that I do, the behaviors, the way that I act, the way that I talk, the way that I discipline my daughter, the way that I treat coworkers, and
its impact on the world around you.
Right.
You're old enough to recognize that my actions have an impact on the world around me.
Right. My problem is that even throughout my years of giving back to local communities, now this is something that I learned early on. There was a side of me that self-promoted this for myself to kind of boast me and make me look good. That was early on. But as I've gotten older, I started to realize that I needed to start doing things away from the public eye, because I find that the people that I surround myself with that have the same kind of demographics of what I want to do and what they want to do, I have more of a connection with. I don't have to publicize it. I don't have to go on Facebook, Twitter, and say, "Oh, I've done X, Y, and Z." Sure, great. The accomplishments that I've had in life have been wonderful, but sometimes they need to be isolated to just me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
No, I totally get it.
I've often been criticized for boosting things that I've done in my life, and obviously that was never the situation. It's just to educate people on how to help. But I think for me, it's been a growing process that I've enjoyed, because I've learned a lot about myself in relationships, friendships, and even as a parent. And what I say by that is that I have to take some accountability for things that I do. I have to. And it's hard. It's a pride thing. And I tell this to people all the time. You have to, it's probably the biggest pill you'll ever swallow, is admitting when you're wrong. It's admitting when you fucked up, and then coming back to the table, addressing it and saying, you know what? I should have been a better person.
Dude, you really need to listen to his last podcast. I just listened to it today.
I enjoy his material.
His
I
lecture,
truly do.
podcast is a lecture that he gave in San Francisco.
Right.
I actually went to go see his show last year in Nashville, and it was very good. It was, but he does a different one. I think he's done like 70 different shows. Like every single show is different.
Right.
But I think based on what you're saying, you will really appreciate that last episode.
Well, and I had recently a friend of mine, and she kind of pointed this out. She goes, I can't seem to gauge you. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? She goes, I can't put my finger on you. I don't, like, I can't figure you out. And I said, well, why is that? She was like, well, you're so opinionated, but yet you're humble enough to understand when you've done something wrong. And I'm like, well,
how is that mutually exclusive? I don't understand.
Well, that's what I was trying to find out, and she was trying to explain to me, and I don't know if I've really even fully understood what she was kind of getting at, is that most people throughout their life have been habitual liars. So people assume that that person is a habitual liar because they've made no efforts to change. Yeah. So when people actually go off in life and make significant changes in their life, they can't peg you as that individual anymore, because you're not. You don't have that dogmatic view of that person. When people,
I think we need to have her on the show and
well, no,
discuss it in further detail. That's
right. But I think what she was trying to get at is that we can't seem to understand where people are at in life when they start to make those significant changes, because we've always had that view of that individual for who they are.
Right, like you've got this, you finally got them in this little box where you've understood.
Right.
This is Anthony.
Right.
I understand him. I get it, and I know where he places that in my life.
Right.
And now Anthony's like, I kind of want to change. I'm over here now. And she still thinks you're here, but you're really like,
right.
You're a little bit in that, but you kind of moved a little bit. She's like, wait a minute, I thought you were this person, but you're kind of that person still. But
yeah,
like, oh my God, you grew. It's almost like when you see somebody that you saw born, like, oh my God, they're 12 years old. Oh my God, they grew so. It was like yesterday. They were like this tall. And like, like in your mind, they're still that little tiny kid,
Right. And that goes with people you haven't seen since high school.
Yeah.
They think of the person you were in high school. Well, obviously you're not that person anymore.
Oh God. I think I still am in a lot of ways.
So people
it's
that
just
I've
more evolved.
Right.
Honestly,
well, people I've known over the years that really don't keep up with me on a daily basis, or I keep up with them.
Yep.
It's hard for them to decipher who you are now, because they're like, well, you used to do X, Y, and Z. Why don't you do that anymore? Well, because I choose not to. I'm making changes in my life to progress as a better individual. Just because I'm not throwing it out there and telling people and sharing the everydays of my life with you, I'm
You're not like a new vegan telling everybody.
No, not at all. And what
you're not doing CrossFit, are you? I would know.
No,
I would know because you'd tell me.
Right. Well, but my point is that I don't have to share everything on social media. I don't have to tell everybody what I'm doing. My privacy in my life has been more enjoyable now than ever because I'm enjoying the fact that I can take on certain projects. I still do a lot of charity work. That hasn't changed. I'm just not talking about it anymore.
Hell,
because
I spend a lot
to-
of time with you, and I don't even know everything about you. Like, I'm sure if I asked, you'd tell me. But like the other day, you're like, "Oh, I'm gonna go see two cellos." I'm like, "No shit."
A lot of people
no idea you were gonna do that. That's great. I'd love to go.
But that's what I'm saying is that this is where we have to understand people better. We have to be able to open up that conversation, that dialogue to say, hey, what are you into? What's changed? What's going on in your life? What's different? Because I remember you used to do X, Y, and Z. What's been going on since?
So what you're saying is maybe try to take the time to understand that maybe there's a little bit more to the person than what their stated beliefs are or what you think they are based on what everybody else says they are or
it's like
what they used to be.
This show...
The reason I said it that way is because I think you can kind of apply that to our previous conversation about Muslims in general. Because, I mean, you can kind of have this overall overarching view of that, the Muslim culture, but you really, when you got to interact with the individuals.
And I have.
Yeah, individuals might...
That's one of the reasons why I can sit here and make the comments that I do about that type of people or religion is because I've spent time in that community. Right. And it's not just coming off of, well, they're bad and they've done X, Y, and Z. No, it's understanding the culture. It's understanding the premise behind what they believe. And as I got more integrated into it, it was just, dude, I mean, I spent about 6 weeks really understanding Muslims. And I know that's not enough time to do it, but in that short time that I did, I have to tell you, dude, I felt different. Like I didn't feel like myself. I felt like I should have been, oh man, I guess the best way I can explain it is like everything that I've ever known or knew coming from the Bible or just from, in general life lessons was completely thrown out the window. Like it's a different life. It's a different study of life. It's a different perspective on how they see Western culture, how they see Christians, Jews, and and it's just it's scary.
No,
it is scary, and that's one of the reasons why I am so outspoken about Muslims. And I'm sorry if that pisses off people, but I've decided to really do some research before I dabbled in the conversation about it. So, but going back to what we were talking about is that's one of, I encourage people to read this book or at least go see him or watch him on YouTube, is that if he can challenge your way of thinking or even the person that you are today, and you can make some small changes, hopefully they'll lead to something bigger, then do so. I think that's good for everybody.
Yeah, so before I forget, the part that I took away from that, the part that stood out to me the most was where it says, maybe it's not the world that's at fault, maybe it's you.
Right.
Maybe you're maybe you're the one who missed the mark. And I was like, I kept reading past that part over and over again. I'm like, because I kind of...
How did you translate it?
Well, I mean, I kind of understand this to be so, and that's kind of why I talk about anarchy, for example, because it says, because government basically says, oh, well, we as this group of people know what's best for everyone else.
Right.
And like, I don't know what's best for everyone else. I barely know what's good for me in my life.
I told you I'm starting to lean more towards, the anarchy. So.
And it's like, just keeping with that same philosophy. It's like, I know I'm flawed. I know that there's things that I can change about myself.
Right.
I know that I don't know what's best for everyone else. I don't even know what's best for my own kids. I don't know what's best for me.
But you do your best to think that you not necessarily.
I do strive. I do strive towards certain principles and ideals, and I do try to spread those general ideas because I feel like those are the most influential and most important aspects of what makes me who I am.
Right.
I don't have a problem with that. It's when people try to take control and power and try to say, well, I know what's best for you.
Yeah, I have a problem with that.
And it's not so much that I have the problem with. You can come to me and said, I know what's best for you, Daniel. You need to do this and this and this and this. Okay, fuck off. I'll do it if I want to.
Right.
The part where I start to have the problem is the gun in the room. It's where they have the monopoly on force and the ability to enforce what they think is best for you. The ability to punish you if you don't do what they think is best for you. It's like, no, wait a minute. We just sit there and saw that example of that politician talking about card-playing nurses.
Right.
She clearly doesn't know what is best for the nursing community. She doesn't know. Like, I would be,
and we don't know what's best for everybody else.
I'm sorry, but
know?
if you look at that lady and how fat she is, she clearly doesn't even know what's best for her in her life.
I tell you
Maybe
what,
she's the one that's missed the fucking target, is what I'm saying.
And you know, it just kind of brought a thought to my head, but she's at an age and a point in her life where she's going to need some nurses, to attend to her. She may not be in a position where she's not going to be that so.
You get what I'm saying, though. It's like you got these people in positions of power that are like, I know what's best for everyone. Like, that is a terribly narcissistic.
I'm just trying to figure out what's best for me at the moment. I don't care about anybody else, and it's not to say that I'm not a caring person. It's just I have to work on me before I can even step outside of that door.
Yeah. So it looks like, is Max your brother or who is that?
Okay. Do you have about 5 minutes and I can explain the story?
I have as much time as you want.
Okay. So a lot of people don't realize, but on my friends list on Facebook, I have a lot of tray wigs that are black. And this is something that a lot of people don't know about me. So, and I'll have to get with LJ on this just to kind of make sure that this is correct. But back during slavery, the white tray wigs used to own a lot of slaves. Mm-hmm. Okay, this has been well documented throughout my family history.
So your family was part of the 3% of slave owners,
right,
in the southern U.S.
I think we had upwards of like 80-something slaves. It was George Treywick from the Carolinas, and then eventually did migrate down to places of Georgia and Alabama. So,
just to be clear, we never owned slaves. So,
well, look at you, all big shot.
Just go ahead and moral superiority right here.
Yeah, it's that white shit. So, as the story as I've been told, or at least understood, and if I'm wrong, hopefully, LJ, he's got more information on this than I do, but just from the knowledge that I have of it is that back during slavery, a lot of the slaves didn't have a last name. They tend to take on their slave owner's last name to be able to find a job, to do whatever it is that they need to do. So Henry He took on the last name Treywick from,
right.
I just forgot his name. Anyways, so then branched off the black side of my family, the black Treywicks. Okay, so you have the white side, then you have the black side. Now we are not blood related, and this is something that I want to tell people. And I've never really had a chance to kind of tell the story, but it is kind of cool. So over the course of the years since slavery, you've had the white Treywicks going down one line, the black Treywicks going down one line. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until probably 5 years ago we started to make that connection between the two families. Okay. So as we're doing this, the black Treywicks have always treated me as family. They have never saw me as anything else, even though we're not blood related. Max, for instance, love my family. He calls me cousin. Tiffany, LJ. There's so many of them that see me as family. They don't see me as, oh, he's a white Treywick and I'm a black Treywick. We have the last name. We're family. And that's what confuses a lot of people, kind of what we were just talking about, that you don't know about me, is that they're like, well, how can you be I'm not racist. I just have a different perspective or view on things that you tell me to be true. My background and my culture far differs than most. And when I tell people this story, they're just like, oh, I didn't know that about you, that, your family owned slaves. And I'm not saying that's a proud thing to talk about, but you know what? When I have this conversation,
it's part of your history.
Right.
What are you going to do? What are you going to do?
You have the black Treywicks that will talk to me.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about slavery. We'll talk about the differences between the cultures. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's just a regular conversation. Nobody gets upset about it. Nobody gets pissed off because we understand it's a part of our history. It's what formed our family to be what it is today.
Yeah, it's not who you are.
Right.
It's just where you came from.
So when I talk to Tiffany, she's like, I tell her I love her. She's like family to me. Yeah. Again, even though we're not blood related, we are still connected through the last name of Treywick. Right. So when you go on my friends list on Facebook and you're like, wait a minute, I thought he was white, but I'm seeing all these Treywick black, Treywick black, Treywick black, Treywick black. Something's not adding up. You know what I'm saying? It confuses people. And so when I tell
Everybody's got a story, man.
right, and then when I tell the story, they're just kind of like, "Oh, I didn't know that about you." I said, "Well, hey, at least thanks for asking. Thanks for taking the time to want to know kind of where I come from and what's a part of my family and my history." And I think that's one of the reasons why I have such the issue about the statues being removed, and it's just
removing Kate Smith's song from. I got it. Well, I think it's about time for that magical section of the show as we wrap up this evening.
Faux business. Faux business.
Faux business.
Alrighty, in tonight's episode of the Faux Business, we're going to tell you why you should be offended about blenders.
Fuck, it's black already.
No, come on, man.
We got to get away from the stigma of race.
No, this isn't. I don't think this is a race issue. I think this
I was just playing. Spinning off the last topic.
Spinning off. It's a blender. I see what you did there.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
No pun intended.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So okay, well, first, when I see this, I think vegan because that's all you see. You don't see meats in it.
Yeah, I know. You don't blend a lot of pizza, do you?
Well, pizza, hamburgers, hot dogs.
You ever had a blended taco?
No.
We should try it.
That ought to be like a live cooking show we do.
So I feel like blenders are, I don't know what the term is. Somebody who is afraid of diversity. What would that term be? Something that is that fears diversity.
I couldn't even tell you.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I don't. I'm sure there's a term for that. If anybody in the comments could please enlighten us on that term. But whatever that term is, that's what this blender is. It's one who fears diversity because no matter what you throw at it, it blends it up into one goopy blob of same.
That's what makes America great.
It's like you can't have a culture of, in this picture, kiwis and bananas, and a culture of pineapple and a culture of strawberries and this subculture of ice, it appears. This icy subculture.
Hey, climate change, man.
Yeah. So instead, as soon as the blender gets to have its say, all of a sudden it's all one culture. It's all one mono thing, and it's just not. There's no diversity. It's all just one color. Yeah. In this case, it'll probably be a nice red.
I guess I don't know. I am a little offended the fact that I can't make shakes or smoothies, out of beef or.
Why can't you? See, I don't understand.
I can't imagine.
That's a limitation of your own imagination.
It is, but
quit being a snowflake. Jesus. Alrighty. Well, that's been another episode of the Unframe of Mind show. You can catch us on all of our social media channels at Unframe of Mind on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., etc. Just hit us up. We'd love to have more conversations like this with folks like you. So hit us up, unframeofmind@gmail.com, or head over to the website. If you want to start catching our live shows directly on our website, that's a brand new feature we just started doing.
Yeah,
so
pull that up and show them. So
I actually, this is the first week we've done it, and my dumbass probably at some point should have checked it to make sure. But yeah, if we scroll down right here, check it out.
Yeah, there we are.
Oh yeah, we're live.
Ooh, feedback.
This is the first week we've done it. So yeah, right there on the website, live.
And usually the podcast comes out within the 2 days of the live show. Once you're done,
I try to get the podcast version out pretty quick. So yeah, definitely.
Cut out the breathing.
Yeah, check out the podcast version as well. I don't always cut out the breathing. Anthony, this guy here, he's got a weird habit. I got a few weird habits myself, and I noticed tonight we did okay. I think tonight we did really okay. I was listening for it, and I was like, I think we're doing a lot better. There's not nearly as much stuttering. Like on my part, I got this habit of doing this right there. You know what I'm saying?
No, you want to know what your biggest habit, your biggest thing that you do?
What?
In the word that you say all the time? I don't think
so.
No. So at any rate.
At any rate.
You say that. I'm not one to point that out to people because I don't want to create a complex.
Oh, no, you won't go.
Holy shit, dude. You say it so much. Look.
I need it brought to my mind because, listen, I can't fix it if I'm not aware of it.
Look,
I do fix the things I am aware of, and I do work on them.
I've got my breathing issues, and I blink a lot.
Oh, you blink a lot?
Oh, my God. Dude, if you go back and you watch previous shows or whatever, I'm like...
It's probably the lights drying your eyes
It
out.
probably is, but I'm like, why am I blinking so much? And then, so I get that integrated into my mind, and I'm like, okay, next show, not going to do it. And I'm like, and I'm trying to tell myself not to blink, but I'm like,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Alrighty. Well, and
you know,
so-
it's funny the things that you find out about yourself when you do these shows live.
Oh yeah.
That you've never known before.
Are you like confronted with your most intimate flaws all of
Yeah.
a sudden? You're like, oh God, I sound like that, or geez, I do that a lot. Why am I doing that? Yeah, the ones that really bother me is the ones where I'm kind of stuttering to get the first syllable out a little bit. It's not like a bad stuttering problem. It's more like, I just kind of, get the thing out of my mouth. It's like that.
I'm gonna start kicking you every time, dude. Come on, just spit it the fuck out.
It's really hard to do it on purpose, but you get the point. And when I'm focused on it and I'm actually taking the time to slow down and talk and clearly enunciate and not have to feel like I have to rush my thought out. And that's usually what the thing is. I'm trying to rush the thought out.
That's my
I'm still trying to
problem
put
with
it
my
together.
breathing is that as I am talking, I'm trying to get like 5 steps ahead of what I'm fixing to say, so I don't sound like a fucking idiot, but I do anyways.
Oh yeah, that's all we do on this show. That's actually the whole reason we do this show is to sound like fucking idiots. So I mean, hey, if y'all want to like point out any of our other flaws that maybe we're not aware of, please let us know. We want this show to be as good as we can for you. And if there's some shit we're doing that's irritating the piss out of you, please tell us.
At any rate.
At any rate.